Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Frank Wright with us tonight. We're on the precipice of making a decision about the future of America. We're 2 weeks away from it officially as of today. It will be election day in the United States of America, and we will be choosing between two men, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Dr. Wright, is it enough for us to say that we're choosing between two men, or are we truly choosing between two other things, if you would?
Well, I think that's very well said, and you're alluding, of course, to the fact that when we cast our ballot, we are voting for an individual. We want to see the qualities of leadership. We want to see the person has what it takes to succeed as president of the United States. And President Trump has demonstrated that, in my opinion, in the last 4 years. His qualifications are impeccable. Not everybody likes the style of his conduct, but I think uh, the only way we could have stood up to the media elites who are taking away freedom and censoring religious expression and depriving us of parental rights and all these other things is to yield to these forces. And he has essentially said, "I will not yield." President Trump, if he were sitting right next to me, I would still say this. He has a healthy self-regard, and he calls people names, and not everybody likes that. Sometimes I've got to be honest, I don't like it. Sometimes it makes me uncomfortable. But he has the strength of character to push back against the liberal elites who have so dominated our political culture for so many years. The other thing that you were leading to, though, let me return to it, is when we cast our ballot for a leader, there needs to be leadership qualities that we think are there. In the case of Joe Biden, there have been legitimate questions about his age and cognitive abilities and the ability to fulfill office. He's even acknowledged that he said, "I will only serve one term." He's not healthy enough, apparently, to be able to serve more than one term. But your question goes to this. Am I really gonna step into the voting booth and cast my vote for Donald Trump? Or am I voting for the things that he stands for the
Yes.
political philosophy that he upholds? That's the real question here. What's on the ballot? Yes, there's two names there. Four names, actually, president, vice president
Yeah.
of each party. But what's really on the ballot is, will we have a future of freedom or a future of tyranny? A future of constitutional governance or a future of ruling by executive fiat and letting the courts decide everything? You've been to Washington, Ken, many times, and if you go to the great Capitol building in Washington, D.C., go inside and find your way to the rotunda
Yeah.
and look up at the ceiling. It's a beautiful sight. But if you look down, if you're standing in the middle of the room, if you look down, there's a little black brass plate right there in the center. And that brass plate is the center of Washington, D.C. North,
Yes.
south, east, and west are divided on that intersection on that brass plate. The founders were making an impossible to miss statement that we are a nation of laws, made by the branch of government closest to the people and most accountable to the people. And President Trump, in my opinion, is doing everything in his power to restore that balance, to appoint judges who will not make laws but rule on the law, and to let the Congress take back its right responsibility of making law and let the executive branch implement the law. And I don't think Judge Gorsuch has always done this in his role in the
Yeah.
Supreme Court, but his confirmation hearing, he said the job of a judge is the job of an umpire. Sort of like that guy with the dark suit, the Navy suit, and that pad on his chest, and he's got the face mask, and he's behind the catcher, and he's calling balls and strikes. Now, if it's a National League umpire, you might be worried about what he's calling. Sometimes they call things so far out of the strike zone, there's no way it could be a strike. But that's the National League. You just got to live with that. But that's the role of the judges, is to interpret the laws that are enacted by Congress. If the law is defective, let Congress fix it. Don't let judges say, here's a new law. And so in so many areas, what President Trump is arguing for is the restoration of constitutional governance. That, I think, is what's on the ballot. 244 years into the American experiment, are we still, as Abraham Lincoln said, will government of, by, and for the people perish from the earth? And one of the men Dr. Kennedy admired the most, Ken, was former Attorney General. We still call him General today, in the Reagan administration.
Yes.
And he worked. He was one of President Reagan's key aides when he was governor of California. He was one of his most trusted advisors. And he said to me one time at a meeting that we were at,
Yes.
that the two most important elections in American history, apart from the first, in which George Washington was elected by acclamation, were 1864, Lincoln's second election.
Yes.
Because if Lincoln had not been reelected, then his opponent would have sued for peace between the North and South, and there would have been two nations, not one. There would have been a northern nation and a southern nation, and slavery would not have been done away with, at least not at that time. We know that technology basically does away with manual labor over time. But
Exactly.
still, the 1864 election, the thing that hung in the balance was the future of our nation. Will it stay one nation? Will government of, by, and for the people perish from the face of the earth? And that's the same thing we're facing now. This is probably the second most important election in American history. Will we remain a united nation, or will we become divided over social issues? Will there be a red state nation and a blue state nation? Or will we abandon the American experiment altogether and revert to the tyrannies that our founders saw in Europe and the very things that they tried to avoid? So
Exactly.
I'm tired of saying that this next election is the most important election in our lifetime. Friends, it is. It may
Yes.
be the second most important election, according to Attorney General Ed Meese, in the history of the nation. And so get out and vote, and find someone who needs a ride to the polls and take them to vote. Make sure that everybody get a chance to express this great thing. Because, Ken, when the American nation was formed, something unique that had never happened in the history of the world came into being. And that is, we get to choose our own rulers.
Yes.
And we're at the brink of losing that. We're at the brink of getting black-robed masters, meaning the federal courts, instead of we, the people, electing our representatives to represent us in Congress and in government.
Dr. Wright.
So I agree with you completely.
Dr. Wright, one of the things that people marvel at in terms of Donald Trump is his management of trade and foreign policy with China. I love when he does that, China. And he's dealt with COVID-19, not only professionally, but personally. And he's always warned us that outside influences like China are attempting to destroy our nation within. This is a two-parter here. Number one, should we all be concerned about foreign pursuits of our politics here? And then secondly, should we be more concerned when there are allegations that a presidential candidate has committed some malfeasance in dealing with a foreign government?
The role of the president and the role of every elected official, and even the role of those who serve in the armed forces, is to defend America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And so, yes, it is the responsibility of the president to make sure that our dealings with foreign governments are on the up and up, that there aren't special deals cut with the children of elected officials just to buy influence. The rest of the world lives and breathes in many respects, especially the third world, on
Yes.
bribes And it's just part of the cost of doing business, it seems, in some respects. America, we won't say that's never been a problem, because there have been people that have been indicted for receiving bribes and so forth. And given the fallen human nature of people, we know that that can happen.
Yes.
But our system is set up to prevent that from happening. If we see an elected official who looks like they are what the attorneys would call personal inurement, they're doing things for their own self-benefit, they are lining their own pockets, to put it in the vernacular, then we have a way of curing that by voting them.
Exactly. Dr. Frank Wright with us. Bit of a technical besmirch. There we are. And hopefully we will get the good doctor back in the midst of a great conversation on politics. I want to show you where he and I received a great deal of our encouragement to pursue life, liberty, and the happiness that comes with Christ.
Karl Marx was once asked in an interview what he was attempting to do, and I trust you will never forget his answer. He said that what he was attempting to do was to dethrone God and to destroy capitalism. Notice the order. The humanist Hitler said in 1933 these ominous words. They should send a chill down the spine of every loving parent. Quote, "Your child belongs to us." And every humanist before and since has endeavored to take the children away from believing parents and to turn them over to the humanist atheist state, that they may be remolded into the new man of the Third Reich. In 1937, he elaborated by saying, "The new Reich will give its youth to no one." Notice, its youth. Now they are hers. But will itself take youth and give to youth its own education and its own upbringing. Shortly after that, criminal prosecution of parents began, and if parents refused to surrender their children to the Hitler Youth movement to be indoctrinated in the teachings of Nazism, they were taken forcibly away from the parents and given to the state. 1936, Adolf Hitler abolished. Note well, my friends, Adolf Hitler abolished all Christian schools in Germany. Dethrone God and destroy capitalism. Circumscribe Christianity and stop the Christian schools. Humanism knows that the Christian church, and particularly the Christian school, is the great obstacle toward their fulfillment of their total secularization and destruction of religion and godliness in America.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are watching that take place today. Dr. Frank Wright with us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We were going to talk about George Soros. We apparently had a technical glitch, and we will do whatever we can to get Dr. Wright back with us next week, because we want to talk about George Soros and why you should be concerned, ladies and gentlemen, about the billionaire atheist, and that the veil has to be lifted off of George Soros and what he's doing tyrannically with this country. This country, ladies and gentlemen, that we so love. I want to give you, in closing, thoughts by Dr. Frank Wright. And I'm giving these thoughts to those who are at the universities, who are sitting in the pews, who are sitting at their desk, who are laying on their bed and watching. you know, Marxism is a false teaching because it is the antithesis of Christ. Dr. Frank Wright.
Again and again in the New Testament, we are exhorted to hold fast to true teaching and to reject false teaching. The problem, of course, is that false teaching does not usually come wrapped with a heresy warning label on it. Instead, it takes some truth, twists it just a little, and adds ideas that are pleasing worldly ears. Paul warns his pastoral protege Timothy about this, writing, "For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions." In our own day, with so much media noise around us, it is vitally important for the people of God to be discerning about truth and falsehood, about what pleases God and what displeases Him. Just recently, several prominent pastors of one of America's largest Christian denominations marched in sympathy with the neo-Marxist Black Lives Matter movement, an organization that officially calls for the destruction of the American family structure. They joined the call to end so-called systemic racism, apparently blissfully unaware that this term is a central doctrine of Marxist critical theory. And remarkably, these naive pastors did so while their own churches were still closed to worshipers, supposedly out of concern for the coronavirus. Elsewhere, a conference was held in which speakers fully affirmed LGBTQ identity while living as a Christian. One breakout session asked this question: what queer treasure, honor, and glory will be brought into the New Jerusalem at the end of time? And this took place in a church under the auspices of America's largest conservative Presbyterian denomination. My friends, this is the time to pay close attention and to heed Paul's warning against those who are false apostles, deceitful workmen disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, Paul says, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light.
Doctor, welcome back. Dr. Frank Wright, I know we're going to run out of time. I'm going to do my darndest because I've been waiting to talk with you all day to bring you back next week if we can do that. But you spoke about the itching ear, in correlation to the writings of Paul and Timothy, and the whole idea that there are ministers who are duly attracted to a billionaire atheist. I wanted to give you an opportunity. Why should Americans be concerned about George Soros, especially 2 weeks out from an election?
Well, Ken, we talked about this division of when you cast a ballot, you're voting really for ideology, for an ideology of freedom or an ideology of socialism. And every honest socialist will tell you that socialism is really a way station on the road to communism. Mm-hmm. Their goal is full-orbed communism. And George Soros is the sort of financial and leadership puppet master behind all of that. If you had to put George Soros in one word, you'd say he's a billionaire radical whose goal is to undermine American security, American system of government, and American ideals. He was born back before World War II. He was born a Jew. His parents placed him with a Gentile during the forthcoming Holocaust, and so he was raised as the godson of a Gentile and escaped the Holocaust. But this man who was his godfather took George Soros around with him as they confiscated the properties of Jews. He, after World War II, made his way first to England, later to the United States. He became a financier. He became a very troubling financier in many respects. He was accused of and proved in many cases to undermine the economies of many nations, including literally breaking the British pound at the expense of British taxpayers. Accumulated a massive wealth. He's on the the Forbes list, top 163, I think, in the world, most wealthiest people. He's already put $32 billion of his money either into his Open Society Foundation or into other left-wing efforts. And he is today the funding mechanism for a whole array of left-wing organizations, everything from Black Lives Matter to radical organizations like Antifa. And these things are sometimes hard to trace. And so we took did a major research project to connect Soros's money trail to all of these left-wing organizations that are doing so much harm in our country, including, Soros, I believe, has put almost $100 million into this presidential election. He says President Trump must be defeated. Trump is a con man, he says. Trump is a would-be dictator. Well, George Soros is pretty much a con man and a would-be dictator in many respects. Yes. And he has these horrible messianic pretensions. He sees himself as a god with a small g. But he says when he was a young boy, he had these messianic ideas about himself that concerned him. But later in life, these are his words, as he began to live those out, he was okay with it. He says that he sees himself, his personal goal is to become the conscience of the world. Those are scary ideas to come out of someone's mouth. And he said further, you've heard the phrase before about the arc of history. He says the arc of history in different places is bent by great events and great people, and it's not bent by itself. He says, I am bending the arc of history for good as he sees it. So he has these messianic ideas that are deeply disturbing, even though he's an atheist. So he's involved in everything. Listen, he has funded prosecutors around the country. Yes. Many people are familiar with that couple, the McCloskeys in St. Louis, who steps outside their mansion when the rioters were coming and broke into a gated community and were getting ready to start set fire to things. He steps up with his AR-15. His wife has a handgun, and as someone pointed out to me today, they weren't really showing good gun discipline.
No, they were
swinging those things around. But thank goodness the prosecutor in St. Louis cracked down on those criminals who were in there. No, they cracked down on the McCloskeys for having a gun. Not a single person who broke into that community and tried to set fires on other homes, not a single person was arrested. And that prosecutor in St. Louis, her election campaign was funded by George Soros. There are 25 or 30 prosecutors around the country funded by George Soros. In fact, Ken, you and I could have predicted where the riots, what cities they were going to be in this past summer, just by looking at the prosecutors in those places, because those prosecutors let them free with no bail or a very, very tiny bail. They let second offenders free without bail. They had hardened criminals who were on the run from warrants from other courts. They turned them loose, all because George Soros's idea is to undermine law enforcement, to undermine peace and security in society. Remember that the only way communism has ever come in is through revolution. Nobody ever peacefully convinces a nation to give up its personal property and all of its freedom. Nobody ever gets them to sign on the dotted line that way. And so Soros's goal is to undermine America, to destroy the foundations. And he's part of that group that people call social Marxists, meaning he sees the two institutions that stand in his way or stand in the way of communism as being the church and the family. And so he's doing everything in his power to destroy both. He's for legalized prostitution. He's for all the things that have led to the destruction of the family. Same, no-fault divorce, abortion, sex outside of marriage that you have to pay no price for. The baby pays a terrible price. But so George Soros is for everything from open borders, meaning he thinks we should have no national borders at all. Anybody that finds their way into our nation should have a vote immediately upon arrival and be eligible for social welfare benefits, all those things. He's for legalizing marijuana. The list just goes on and on and
exactly.
on. And all of these things are to undermine the foundations of society.
A lot of people don't understand that the three major purposes of Black Lives Matter is to first eliminate the male patriarch in the household. Number two, to eliminate Western civilization. But last being first, eliminating the gospel from the world. So I want to give you the opportunity here, Dr. Wright, because you and I both know that there are members in the pew right now who are saying, but it's okay to be a part of Antifa. It's okay to be a part of Black Lives Matter. It's just a political viewpoint, nothing more. Can you speak to that in closing, sir?
Let me say it this way. It's okay to be concerned about injustice in America. It's important to be concerned about injustice in America. Part of Jesus reaffirmed what the Old Testament says, that the two greatest commands are love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Part of loving your neighbor as yourself is sticking up for the poor to see that they get justice. It's sticking up for justice for all. But that's not what Black Lives Matter is all about. Listen, Ken, you and I both know, if they cared about Black lives, the number one organization they would attack in America would be Planned Parenthood, which disproportionately aborts Black children than any other. And almost all their clinics are located very close to high density populations of Blacks, Hispanic, and others. If Black Lives Matter cared a whit about Black lives, they would notice that there's genocide going on in America at the hands of Planned Parenthood. Of the 850,000 babies aborted this year, something like nearly 40% of them will be Black babies. In some cities, Dr. Alveda King says, in some cities in America, there are more abortions than there are live births for Black mothers.
Yes.
And if Black Lives Matter cared about stuff, they would express that. They don't care. They care about power. They care about dethroning the power structure, which is the church and it is the family. That's a horrible statistic, Ken. From 1960, the statistics from the federal government are that 6% of all live births in 1960 were to an unwed mother. And last year, year before last, 43% of all live births were to an unwed mother. 56% in the Hispanic community, and I think it's either 72 or 73% in the African American community. Only one out of every four births is to a father that's either identifiable or in the home or whatever it might be. And so being raised without a impact on the family that has. They've gone a long way in their success of destroying the family.
Yes.
The church is in the crosshairs now, and we need to recognize, Ken, your point that we're trying to get to here is we need to recognize that what's in the crosshairs, what's on the table at this election is really the gospel. Without freedom, we will face government oppression to continue to proclaim the gospel. Now, if we're faithful followers of Christ, we're going to proclaim Christ no matter what. But freedom is on the table, so the gospel is on the table. Freedom is on the table, the family is on the table. Freedom is on the table, the church is on the table. This is an election about the future of a free nation. And if you don't vote in this forthcoming election, then God help you. Because Dr. Kennedy liked to say, when Jesus gave his teaching about render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God's, that was a command. Render, yes. I tell you, render unto Caesar. Render unto God. And the least of our rendering is casting a vote on election day. And if we don't, Dr. Kennedy said many times, it is a terrible sin to not vote in an election where you can.
Dr. Wright, thank you for coming on tonight. I look forward to your return. I admire what you do, and I admire D. James Kennedy and his institute. How can people support your work? How can people get in contact with you?
Ken, to find out more about our incredibly detailed research project on George Soros, I urge people to go to our website, very easy to find, djkm.org. It stands for D. James Kennedy Ministries. djkm.org, and you will see there a banner at the top of the page, George Soros, Billionaire Radical, the George Soros plan scheme to remake America. And we have a 1-hour video resource available. We have a book called George Soros Exposed, and we have these 2 charts that I was referring to earlier. We call the Follow the Money chart. How does George Soros and all the other left-wing organizations, how do they fund that network of theirs? We've fully researched and documented all those things. So if they come to djkm.org, they can find all of that. And Ken, thank you for all the kind things that you've said, and we appreciate your great work as well, brother.
Thank you so much. God bless you, and keep
Same to you.
his faith. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Frank Wright with a man. This is an extremely tremendous and great honor. We will be right back right after this.
Hi, we're the Mooney family, and we're staying here at the Westgate Lakes Resort in Orlando, Florida.
I was initially skeptical about bookvip.com because the price was so reasonable. But for only $198, we get a beautiful 2-bedroom condo, 2 full bathrooms, kitchen, living room, and laundry facilities.
Don't forget the washer and dryer.
Oh yes, gotta love it.
How much did we save?
We saved over $800 just on lodging alone, which allowed us to all go and enjoy Universal Studios Orlando.
Yay! So let's show you our living room and the master bedroom.
Come. Let's go. We're gonna start with the master bedroom.
Oh.
Here's the bed, the big bed. And then there is the hot tub or jacuzzi, whichever one you want to call it. In the living room, let's take a look. Oh, wait, there's a TV in here. And then the nice living room. And then...
Get a shot of the cookies?
Oh.
They even give us complimentary cookies.
Complimentary cookies.
Thanks,
Facebook via pizza. I thought we just Facebook.
Facebook VIP.com.